Hello, everybody, and welcome to the finale of the series that is making the sky come to life. That is right. This is part 5, and I have taken something that looked more like this, a blank cast, and turned it into this, which is definitely somewhat true to the sketch, and I would consider it for that reason pretty much a success. You'll see me kind of sand the back of him in this video, drill a hole in this sample here just to show you how I would do it for hanging it as an ornament. And, you know, of course, all the painting that I did to achieve the sun that looked like this. I went back and forth a lot, so it's a little bit of a journey, but if you're interested to see how I did this guy, well, you're about to find out.
Okay, and here I am showing you some medium grit sandpaper and also the back of my cast, which is a little glossy. And as I showed you in the previous video, the cast was a little uneven on the back because of where the resin sort of flows out a little bit from the mold. I reassured you that wasn't an issue because of what I am demonstrating right here, which is the power of sandpaper. It also made that glossy finish a nice matte finish on the back, which I appreciate because even though I won't be painting the back, I like it to have that nice smooth finish. And here I'm going to demonstrate on one of my other casts that I'm not going to end up painting, just what I would do to drill a hole to make it an ornament. Here you can see my fiance is helping me, and he does a little pre-drilled indentation with a regular hand drill. This will help guide the drill press because it's on a ridge there, as you can see, of one of the rays. It will make sure that it doesn't slide off to the side, and it has a nice place to sit, which increases precision. And as you can see, the drill press itself is extremely precise, and it turns the resin basically into Parmesan cheese. It's a very clean hole, and if you can manage to use a drill press, I recommend it. I would just put a little wire ring through and then a ribbon and call it a day. Here I'm showing you some areas on the inside of the eyes where in my silicone mold I had a couple bubbles. They're very, very tiny, but what this meant is it has a little hole in the resin cast. Here I'm just showing you some of my materials as I go along. But what I did to fill those pesky holes that I was just trying to show you is I basically just mixed together a very teeny tiny amount of resin and then added the color like I did for the original cast that you can see there, and tried to use a needle head to basically apply tiny droplets and smooth them out. Now, I didn't think it would cure, but it actually did work just fine, and especially if it's an area you can paint over just in case it doesn't match. I think that that is a great solution to having bubbles in your mold, and it's definitely sustainable to do for each and every one of these, even though it is potentially a pain. All right. So you can see I have that nice palette there I got from Michaels actually, and what's so cool about it is it has little caps that can cover the paint troughs so that you can keep the paint nice and wet, and especially because I'm using acrylic paint, again, acrylic paint, which dries very quickly, and especially since I'm working in such small pieces because this is a small object, I'm using small amounts of paint and it dries in no time. Also, might I just say, I am so happy because I did not need to prime this at all. Oh, you see my spaghetti there. That was my lunch. Just excuse me. But I did not need to prime the sun. The paint sticks phenomenally well. Again, I don't know to attribute that to the cornstarch method for the mold release, but either way, I definitely wouldn't recommend using a regular mold release when this seemed to work so well. And I just painted the eyes that base color white. Now, I did end up adding a lot of yellow, more than you can probably tell, to make sure that that white was a very off-white. Otherwise, that white would look a little alarming and cool toned against that yellow sun flush, if you will. Now, I started off with a pretty rosy color for the lips. It ended up looking a little like lipstick. So even though I wanted to make this translucent thin wash like I'm about to show you me doing on the cheeks, The wash of color did not work out because of the crevices of the lips, so I had to do a hard layer of paint, and I struggled with that for a little while, as you can see, to determine what color looked sort of natural. And here I'm applying some of the blushing, nice and translucent, as a simple wash of color with my fingertips. It literally was just as easy as that. You just got to make sure you water your paint down considerably, dab your finger in it, and move your finger constantly, otherwise it's going to dry in a weird pattern. Okay, now you see that little gold cap? That has the gold enamel paint that I showed you in the last video. I am experimenting with putting this not only on the lips, but the eyebrows. Yeah. That lasted all of about 2 seconds. I sanded it right off with fine grit sandpaper because I did not like it. It turned out looking a little too flamboyant. I don't know how else to say that. It just wasn't my cup of tea, so I moved on, and luckily the sandpaper kind of worked on the eyebrows at least, but I did have to repaint the lips. And I'm beginning on the eyes finally, just starting with a base coat of brown, kind of going from dark to light, if you will. And it's really just me figuring out where to place the irises to make sure that the eyes look naturally set in the head, and that they're also big enough to kind of communicate a kindness in the expression, if that makes any sense. I'm adding some kind of yellows and oranges, as you'll see in this clip as I go on, to lighten up those eyes. And then they do darken up a bit again when I add the pupils. So again, I just want to reiterate, the cornstarch method really paid off with the mold. Using that as a release, I think it created this kind of cast on it, this white cast, but not in a bad way whatsoever, because it's making the paint adhere to it really well. Actually, maybe too well, because if you don't wipe it off immediately with a wet paper towel, it's going to dry in about 4 seconds. Yeah. I found this a little challenging, if I'm going to be honest with you guys, because it's a very small piece and I don't paint a lot to begin with. So to paint a three-dimensional object, which is so tiny and requires such tiny details, well, it was just like sculpting it, you know, it was a bit of a challenge. You can see I landed on a much more subtle color for the mouth, which I was happy with. And I'm just kind of working a little bit more on the eyes before I get back to the eyebrows. Sort of mulling it over in my head and thinking, like, do I want dark brows like I had in the sketch? I wanted them to be a little bushy, but I didn't want them to come across as like, I don't know, malevolent. I wanted a happy sun. That's part of my character, right? With this character creation is it's a happy, benevolent sun. Kind of gives you this warm feeling when you look at it, and he seems happy and kind. And to add to that, I made the pupils sort of large as well. I feel like small pupils are usually associated with predation, so for my character, I made them larger. And I'm adding some little highlights in the eyes, which I think really helped to complement the features. Okay, now I'm finally getting back to the eyebrows. It went a lot more smoothly this time around, and it went pretty fast. I mean, I basically just do these teeny tiny little wisps, just with that little thin brush, and it turned out really naturally. Sort of this dark blonde golden color, as you can see. Now this is my favorite part. I take that piece of a dish sponge, and because it's so porous and it has all those little holes, it applies the paint to the edges of the rays in this sort of spotty, uneven way that I really couldn't replicate with a brush unless I took a lot of time. So big time saver there, and I highly recommend that technique. I think with the other casts, if I make more and kind of reproduce a lot of these, I'll use that same method every time. The only thing I wish I did is maybe add a little bit more of that golden brown hue as well to offset some of the brightness of that orange on the tip.
Okay, so my final thoughts. I consider this a pretty big success. I'm happy with the way he turned out. Are there some things I would do differently moving forward? Yeah, I would probably use more washes of watered down acrylic as opposed to these kind of hard lines like maybe the eyes seem to kind of give off. I would definitely continue using a uniform color palette, sort of like I did with him, with just like gold and orange, and that's about it. Because I think the monotony of it turned out nice. I was originally thinking like, should I add a whole bunch of color? I'm really glad I didn't. I think he's great. He's not perfect, but nothing is. I think going forward, I would like to make a lot more of these and maybe experiment with different ways of painting it, and maybe even airbrushing if I can ever get my airbrush machine to work, which otherwise would have made an appearance in this video, no doubt. I'd just like to thank you so much for watching all these videos, for being along with me in the process. And, you know, maybe I'll be creating some more videos like this soon and you'll see me go back to the beginning. And that's about that. I hope you have a wonderful day, and until next time.